In a city or near it, free men once had their birthplace, their residence, and so had all their known ancestors, relations, and acquaintance. Its authorities control their religion, their civil law, their military fortunes, and their festivals and sports. If it was ever in peril, they were in equal peril too, and they normally prospered in its prosperity. It was familiar to them in its entirety, and they knew all its principal men by sight and heard their orations. And it was as citizens of that city, if by chance they ever left it, they were known and judged by the rest of the world. If we ask ourselves how so close and lasting a political society had arisen, I think we should have to consider various alternatives, or perhaps converging or successive causes of growth. A village grows up at the place where paths cross in any inhabited region, and it is there that fairs are held, inns open, and temples built. That would be growth by virtue of economic convenience or necessity. But when instead of a village we find a defended town, though walls are not in themselves signs of militant enterprise, they may indicate that a band of marauders, after pillaging a particular region, may find it necessary to entrench themselves in their cave or their stronghold against probable reprisals. And then we should see the city as a byproduct of militant adventure on a large and permanent scale. A great city will be the nest of a numerous and permanent association of bandits, and this will be confirmed by the relation which the citizens of the city had to the peasants in the surrounding country, even if these and their chiefs were also legally citizens. The elders in the city, probably heirs to parcels of the original city lands, will be heavily armed, perhaps mounted on war horses or chariots, and altogether irresistible for the shepherds or sailors, woodcutters or miners. There will be also many artisans in the city, whose sons might be regular soldiers or light armed auxiliaries. Thus we should be in the presence of a complete military and aristocratic organization, perhaps with a king or high priest at its head. This would have been a city built up and existing to serve a militant enterprise, perhaps establishing by force a suzerainty over minor cities akin to it. Beyond this limited and easily cancelled expansion, a purely military city-state like Sparta was not likely to go. Its ambition was not at all to conquer or convert the world, but like a race of hunters or athletes or Pythagorean philosophers, to lead together a severe, brave, and simple life, in contempt alike of the voluntary slave who drudged and hoarded, or the fool with his absurd passions and unnecessary sorrows. This was an essentially moral, or more specifically, an aesthetic enterprise, but having the form of a complete human polity, not a separated private society, like a monastic order. It included marriage, political independence, and dominion over slaves and helots, and a selective friendship in the surrounding political world, with action in the necessary wars. But it was not a faction, either political or religious or moral, because it aspired to live its own disciplined life without attempting to diffuse it. Singularity was its pride, and disdain of wealth and knowledge its weakness. It sterilized human nature in the vain conceit of showing that it might, each of them, become heroic and godlike, all the more for standing, like a bronze statue, in the midst of a swarm of howling and hiding beasts. Why did Athenians, like Socrates and Plato, immediately after the age of Pericles, as well as the conservatives all over Greece, look with admiration towards this artificial barbarism? No doubt because they felt the corruption and inevitable decline of their own country, and of all its liberal glory. But why this corruption and decadence? Consider the contrast with Rome, never in the least Spartan, and yet, at that time, by its military and administrative endurance and genius, beginning to dominate the world. Why had Athens, that had repulsed the immense Persian Empire, failed against corrupt Syracuse and meager Sparta, when Rome was destined to destroy utterly the formidable military empire of Carthage? Rome, like Carthage and Athens, was an imperial city-state. It was not, like Persia, a conquering tribe or nation, extending the domain of its hereditary monarch in a series of wars of growth rather than imagination or enthusiasm. But the empires of city-states, except that of Rome, were based on commerce and consequent wealth, which a prevalently naval force extended and protected. Roman enterprise had always been political, not economic, and its conquests were made on land, after which a navy was established to protect the commerce in the Mediterranean for economic objects, not as a help to extend commercial ventures. Commerce, no doubt, served luxury too, during the Roman decadence and in the Byzantine Empire. But in Rome, the wealth that supported its luxury was still landed wealth. This makes all the difference in the stability of empire and in its moral solidity. A Venice may be long, prosperous, and beautiful, but with a meretricious and theatrical beauty. Such, among the Greeks, have been the character of Corinth and Syracuse. But Athens had an early history of internal growth and political discipline, which gave to its imperial enterprise a nucleus of political and moral hardihood, such as the British Empire has had at home, which British administration preserved even in governing foreign peoples, and its colonists carried with them wherever they migrated. But the most sudden and fruitful of military enterprises, having such a moral nucleus, have been those of Alexander and of Islam. Alexander's enterprise was not arbitrary. The whole history of Herodotus, dedicated to the Nine Muses, gives its original grounds. It was a war to secure safety for Greece, and in its victory it never thought of peopling all Asia with Greeks, but was content to turn it into a friendly and enlightened empire. The Greeks succeeded in transforming a part of Asia until the Muslim or even the Turkish conquest into a Hellenized world. And the Muslim conquest, especially Mesopotamia, Persia, and Spain, revived spontaneously in a novel and delicate form the elegance of the Hellenic arts and manners, without any hostility to the larger spiritual inspiration proper to Asia itself. Yet there are always seeds of futility and artifice. A foreign conquest cannot knead two peoples into one until several generations of forgetful heirs of the old world and refractory pupils of the new have generated an unwitting hybrid that feels itself young and original. This occurs rarely. What happened in the Hellenized East was that the Hellenic and Christian elements were submerged by Islam, except in Byzantium itself and the native Greek territories, and that almost nothing of the Arab or Moorish civilization survived in Spain, while even in the Arab communities it is now helplessly struggling under European and Jewish pressure that prevents it from knowing what it wants. Is a convinced and unadulterated Islam again capable of exercising dominion in economics and in culture? That is somewhat as if we asked whether the Catholicism of the 13th or that of the 17th century was again capable of dominating Western Europe and modern America. But the subject of religious enterprises and their fate is a large one and deserves separate treatment.